It's a lot of big words like pastor, theologian, dual vocation of pastor, theologian, and artist. Is it a dual if there's three?
No.
What's the...
Welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans, a Wayfolk Arts podcast, with your hosts, Hannah,
Phil,
Jackson,
and Maddie. Welcome back to the show, everybody. What? You said the timer was running.
here we are.
What?
We're here today.
You stopped.
Oh, I didn't know I was just welcoming everyone.
Welcome, everybody.
I hope you feel welcome in this episode of Liturgical Shenanigans.
This week, I'm really excited to talk about what we're talking about because I'm still unclear. It's a lot of big words like pastor, theologian, dual vocation of pastor, theologian, and artist. Is it a dual if there's three?
No.
What's the... See?
What would it be
Dual
called?
vocation of artist and minister.
Artist and minister.
What if there was like a duel, like a sword fight, and there were
And
three?
dual vocation of
That's
pastor
Duel
and
of the Fates,
theologian?
and there were three of them.
We don't really use the pastor theologian phrase all that much, but
All right.
I thought we were talking about
Yeah.
But we do have the artist theologian.
That's what it was.
Yep. And then the dual vocation of artist and minister. These phrases are phrases that we kind of throw around every once in a while on the podcast or on the website or in our various posts and things like that. And we wanted to just kind of highlight them a little bit because we just noticed, I noticed that like I use it pretty frequently in describing things. And as you say, Maddie, they're like a little bit amorphous words. They sound nice when you roll them off, but
And I do know what they mean. I'm being a brat.
But there is something like
Well,
important.
individually, yeah, but not like if you squish them together, does it mean something different?
Yeah.
What is the tension that we're trying to evoke when we say artist theologian, or like how is that? Are those different things, and like what do we want to see in that tension?
Wait,
What?
never mind.
Okay.
What's the word for three if not dual? Trinity?
trifold.
Like
Think. So a fight between
Trifold?
three is a trifold?
A fight between three,
Yeah, it's not
No,
a
it's
dual.
a duel,
it
like
wasn't
the
a
Duel of the
duel, but,
Fates.
like-
We've
So
been
it is
there.
a dual. Interesting.
but not a dual.
They're spelled differently.
Oh! I didn't know they were different words.
One is a dual.
So the
and
word
one is a
I don't
duad.
know is Oh, welcome back.
So today's more of a topic based one. And there's kind of I wonder how we're going to engage this well. But I think the kind of folks who use those two phrases the most are Phil and I. So I wonder if there's a way that we could maybe kind of start both of us kind of saying what we mean by the phrases that we use.
Oh, I like that.
Dual vocation of artist and minister and artist theologian.
I like it.
And then just spend some time responding to it a little bit.
I like that.
Because I think what we will discover through the course of this episode is that we have some areas that we all resonate with and areas that we all have some dissonance with. So, what do you think, Phil? Do you want to go
Sounds
first
great.
or shall I?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Sounds good. Yeah. So the phrase that I often use to describe what Wayfolk does and a lot of the work that Liturgical Shenanigans is reflecting on is the dual vocation of artist and minister. And what I mean by that is the role, honestly, it's a way to express some of my own journey of how I've found my expression of my faith and what I believe I'm called into as a faithful worker within my faith tradition. The call of the artist is to notice. The call of the artist is to notice, to metabolize, and then importantly, to return back to the people that are around the artist in some sort of way, what they experience in the world around them. Sounds a lot like what preacher does too. The way that a preacher notices things, whether it is something from a scripture or from the world around them, they take it in, they process it, they metabolize it, and then they return it to the congregation in some way. So I think there's a lot of synergy between those two roles, just in that definition of it. But I think there's even more that kind of connect. The connection between the artist's ability to notice things and bring out the sacramental in everyday life, and the ability of the minister to create moments of ritual significance, moments of thin places, moments when people can experience the sacramental in houses of worship, in day-to-day tasks, in all sorts of things. There's a lot of synergy there. There's also the kind of role of the artist as prophet and the minister as prophet that has a lot of synergy with them too. The artist is called to notice something, and oftentimes the thing that they're noticing is something that a system or a bully or a group of people are wanting people not to notice, and calling attention to it, bringing it out. If you look at most of the social movements or the kind of uprisings or the people gathering together that have happened over history, there is often artists involved in the kind of rallying of the people around them. That's also the role of the prophet. If you look at the kind of prophetic narratives, if you look at the prophetic writings of Isaiah or anything like that, the prophet is kind of gathering this group of people around them. Prophets are often not lone voices on a hill, but are in fact cultivating a community around them, and they are speaking together and noticing things about the system that are broken. So I think there's a lot of synergy there too between what the minister is called to do in the prophetic stance and what the artist is called to do in the prophetic stance. So I like the term dual vocation because it says two vocations can be held within the one person, and though it's kind of Venn diagrammy, and there's pieces of each that apply, but also pieces of each that are a little far at the margins of them as well. And so it kind of allows you the freedom to say, I'm limited in this way too. I am both an artist and a minister, and I can't be just fully one of them. There's the ability for me to kind of like channel the pieces of those two callings that have the most synergy and find this kind of meandering way of expressing them in the world. So there you go. There's my elevator, long elevator, like maybe a 60-floor elevator pitch.
I liked it.
You did like the lock button part with you.
Right. No, close the door. Let me tell you.
I'm not ready yet. Hold on.
There's so much good in there.
Do we want to pause and respond, or do we want Phil to go next?
Yeah.
Mine is, I think, shorter, but probably will flesh out more later. A lot of it was contained within yours. I think what's significant to me in the two words when we say artist-theologian is about the overlap. Or is the lens, right? So when we say, I was like, oh, Jackson has words. So let me quick Google theologian, and oh, good, the Oxford Dictionary can help me here. A person who engages or is an expert in theology. Cool. So thank you, Oxford, for that. Really appreciate it.
In the quiver.
Got it. But like, yeah, the idea that I mean a lot. I try to fit a lot of things into theology when I talk about it, and more than probably is helpful sometimes. But that probably shows a lot about my theology. That when we look at who are people, if we the discussion of who or what or is God encompasses reality, a view of reality, or an understanding of life or purpose or personality within creation, or any of that connects to theology for me. And so I think when I say artist-theologian, I think what I mean is people who engage the questions of everything through an artistic lens, or through a creative lens, or through a questioning, not necessarily bound to rationality or fact lens, but people who are willing to draw on metaphor and image and these different ways of trying to say what otherwise cannot be said, and see what otherwise cannot be seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I really like what yours does with, I think when I say artist-theologian, there's no necessity of ministry. It's more, I can do that probably. I may argue with myself here, but I can probably do that alone. I can probably sit and speculate on, but the answers I'm going to find are going to push me differently. So it's just interesting. But like the intentionality of saying the dual vocation of artist and minister means there's a bit of a so what, or what do I intend to do with these insights, with these expressions? What are they for? And ministry means to administer, right? To give, to serve, to care for, and that's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Good episode. So I think
No. There were too many beautiful words, and I want like a transcript of them so that I can go back and respond to the pieces I wanted to respond to, because there were so many lovely thoughts in there. So I think the interesting thing is when the four of us have talked about this in the past, we tend to primarily talk about the term artist-theologian, but we have all these other callings that you two have just named: minister, prophet. Yeah, just I love how this is sort of expanded. We're gonna come back to me because I am still collecting my responsive thoughts. But while I'm collecting, Jackson, so you talked a lot about artist and minister. How what are your thoughts about the theologian aspect of that? Where does that fit in your Venn diagram?
Yeah. It's interesting that you've chosen theologian as a term in there, Phil, because I think I also hear you using that quite expansively. I think there's been times in my life where I have tried to expand my use of theologian, and then I'm met with some folks who probably rightly, to some degree, at least in a definition of the word, and in their understanding of it, come up to me and say, well, this person isn't really a theologian.
Oh,
like
they're a philosopher.
They're a philosopher, or
Drives me
or they're a pastor writer, or
crazy.
something like that. And one that stands out in my head is, as I was prepping for classis exams, I was informed that when you bring your two favorite theologians to this, please don't bring C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis is not a theologian. He is someone who writes about theology. He's a Christian. He is someone who has compelling, interesting thoughts about what it means to have faith, but doesn't have a systematic, and thus
people get really
have a
triggered
theology.
by the word theology.
So
I think that's part of the artist-theologian thing in my head too, because well, look, there's the Enneagram 9 policing everything that's about to come out. Okay.
Hello, God.
Hi,
Nice to
everybody.
see you today.
Hi, friends. Okay, I'm going to throw out my more critical parts and know that there's other parts of me too. But that kind of gatekeeping is probably very helpful in certain spaces where we want to have a certain kind of conversation or show a certain kind of familiarity with, especially like, let's say, in a denominational examination, to show you understand the roots of the theology of this particular group and the historicity of that, and what we, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Whoops, there it came through again. But it is important, but that's not the only use of, theology is Godology, right? Like the thinking about God, study of who God is, what God is. And I think that needs to not be totally gatekept, right? I think if what we get from that saying, like, here's what a real theologian is, or a systematic theologian is, or a credible, there's a doctor of theology. That's a thing that exists, and people put a lot of work into it, and I want to respect that. But what I think that doesn't mean, and what I think most theologians wouldn't want it to mean is that nobody else should be doing this thinking.
Yeah.
Or doing this exploration, or has anything to say about it. And so I think I'm using it more in that way. And if we need to throw amateur or whatever, fine. But I think the point is that is the play and the work, the act of engaging in it more than the credential.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How does that hit?
I have mixed feelings because I think people get really triggered by the word theologian, and what is and who is not a theologian. And I think part of that, like you're saying, Phil, is good and helpful. It's almost like we want to honor the reverence with which we speak of certain theologians, or kind of like not everybody can be a doctor. Like you said, there's a lot of schooling that goes into that, and genuine expertise and knowledge. And it is good to be careful about what theologies we read and put weight into, and who we trust and what words we trust. And I think part of the urgency with which we only label certain people's words as coming from a theologian is because we want to make sure we're trusting the right people.
It's like saying peer-reviewed, or like saying...
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yes, for sure.
Where I struggle with that is who gets to say who we trust. And that's the gatekeeping piece. And why are their words more correct than mine? Or why C.S. Lewis is doing all the same things that a theologian? Oh my gosh. That a theologian is doing. And why have we just shifted what word we can use to label C.S. Lewis because of the background he has and because of the schooling he has? I've talked about this before with seminary, because someone else was privileged enough to be able to afford to jump the hoops with which they needed to jump in order to be labeled a theologian. That's not fair. There are people that have just as valid and God-given truths that deserve to be out there and that should bear weight that perhaps couldn't jump all the hoops. So I have it's a both and. I want to be all in, anybody can be this, and I also understand why we're not all in, anyone can be this all the time. It's the same like if everything's holy, nothing's holy, and I both love and hate that. Like it's just tricky.
Which is interesting to pair it with artist. Mm-hmm. Because artist, I feel like, pulls theologian into something that is much more accessible.
Well, and artists bend the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
artists come up with things from the margins all the time.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, and this is interesting too, how we gatekeep that word.
Ooh,
Yeah,
interesting.
Absolutely.
Who is an artist? Well, I'm not an artist. Like I enjoy creating things. I doodle. I write, but I'm not. What makes an
I'm not an artist.
Last week we talked about this book Jackson's making me read.
Right.
And I talked about what makes an artist, and an artist is an artist when they put their stuff out there, right? And their work has the opportunity to bring beauty to another human.
Yeah. I think, and perhaps this isn't resonating with you right now, but I think I've heard you have some dissonance with artist before, Maddie, and claiming that title for yourself. Are you comfortable sharing just a little bit around that? Or?
Yeah, it's probably similar to like the situation you're describing, Phil, of I do things, but I'm not an artist. It just feels like I'm not deserving of that term, or the work I do isn't good enough to be labeled art. And I'm trying to break free of that, because if I'm talking to someone else that's not me, I would go, you're totally an artist. What you do is art. That's BS. But for me, yeah, I don't feel worthy of the label artist, because I don't feel like my work is what I think of when I think of art. And I've always struggled with that. I don't draw well enough, or I don't paint well enough, or my words don't flow well enough to be considered this thing. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I think it was in the after show last week, so you guys are getting a little bit of the special features in this one. But Phil talked about the oh no, I'm losing the phrase from, it's a great book called The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer.
The phrase?
The police.
The fraud police.
The fraud police. The fraud police
Yeah,
show up.
it's imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it's
I
imposter
have
syndrome.
huge imposter syndrome everywhere I go, always, to be clear, no matter how competent and good at something I actually am. But with art particularly, I think of a certain vibe, and I just don't know that I am cool enough to fit that vibe.
Well, and I think this is where that vocation word you're throwing out there really matters, because if we're talking about artist, if we're talking about theologian, or even minister, really, as a credential, right, as a thing I have to earn or defend or show that I deserve to be called this thing, that's a different conversation than this is what we do. You know,
Yeah.
like someone might be a chef because they have that job at a restaurant and that's their title. Or they might be someone who enjoys really, really cooking. And which one is more of a cooker person? Is vocationally a person who is a food artisan? Both, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, maybe not the difference between am and doing, but the Venn diagram of am and doing, like I am or I am doing this, is just interesting to hold together.
Well, Hannah, you have some of that with theologian.
Yeah, it's true. I was thinking as you were talking, Maddie, that like, I think my thing with theologian, just for myself, is similar to yours, but it's not exactly that I am not cool enough to be a theologian, or that I'm not necessarily capable of being a theologian. It's just not my home base. Like, it's not, that doesn't feel like a theology.
There's no resonance.
Yeah, it doesn't quite resonate with me. But I also do think that is dictated by my idea of what a theologian is, and my idea that theology is this very abstract thing, and we just use abstract concepts, and like it's all ideas and words, which is funny coming from me because our words are my art form. But like it just, I can swim in those waters, but it like if you were listening to the first episode, this is why I like having tangible, embodied things, is because that feels like home base to me. And those things I don't often find, or I haven't found in my experience of theology and theologians, which I know I have several friends who will push back at me on that, in this room and not in this room. But I like, that's just how I have come to understand theology, is as this thing that I don't 100% resonate with as my wheelhouse.
Theology is really intimidating.
Yeah.
Too, generally, and overwhelming, and there's so much of it that I don't know if it's the same as you, Hannah, but I also I feel really intimidated, and I feel like I don't fit in any specific theology base generally. Like when I did my credo for seminary, you do your systematic theology. Basically, you write 40-something pages on your theology. And every time the professor was like, you're coming across as this, or you're coming across as this. And they were all wildly different from each other. And who cares? Like, why does it have to be why do I have to worry about what kind of theology base I'm coming across, or what theologian I'm coming across as supporting, because I'm supposed to, quote unquote, come across as supporting one thing because this is the box Well,
it makes me think of our particular, I'm saying our, I'll go with it. We're kind of all rooted in some sort or other of Reformed-y thinking or theology. And that idea, if we go back to, let's pick Luther, and this idea of the way that we understand things isn't to be gate kept by the elite of the church, right? Like this whole idea of, hey, let's translate scripture so people can read it and explore this. Let's make sure that ministers have their own opportunities to learn these things and study these things. So it's not just like there's this one ultimate authority that speaks it and you don't get to question it. But I think that lingers, whether it's through patriarchy or whether it's through whatever systems we have that kind of don't want us to change too much. I think maybe I'm wrong, but as I hear us talking about that feels like something I'm not really allowed to have. I wonder how much of that legacy is in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't want to put that on you, but
yeah.
I wonder about that.
I don't know.
You also shouldn't have to want to be a thing, especially you said that's not your wheelhouse, but I really heard you say that word doesn't resonate with you. It doesn't carry life and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, if it doesn't resonate, then it doesn't need to be a part of. Yeah, we don't need to. Nobody should put on you what you should. I think it's more like.
For sure.
It's more like if it's not resonating is different than I'm not allowed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And identifying why doesn't this resonate? Is it because genuinely like I'm comfortable with the fact that this isn't part of what makes me me, or this isn't part of my jam or something, versus it's not allowed. I'm not worthy of that being part of me. And that feels like important work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes me think of the stuff that we've said before about how liturgy is a imposing word for people to engage with. A lot of the same things that we've said in this conversation, we said around, the thought of like trying to say someone write your own liturgies, and someone saying I could never write a liturgy because it is gatekept, because it carries these connotations and things like that, or just because it's intimidating all on its own to try to kind of match this form and the history and the tradition of it. So I'm mindful of that. I'm mindful of what we said in that episode about wanting to be a space that extends the invitation as much as we can to people to engage this thing that for whatever reason that maybe has felt intangible for them before.
I'm noticing in myself, I've talked about this on other podcast episodes. I feel similarly about minister. Mm-hmm. And who gets to be called minister and who gets to do ministering and why. It's the same thing. Why? Because you could afford to jump the hoops and learn the things. You get to speak the words of institution. And on one hand, I think that that's really important, because if you jump the hoops and did the things, we can trust that you know the full weight of what you're about to do. And also, it doesn't mean God doesn't equip and call people who can't to jump the hoops to do. So it's just, I don't feel any sort of comfort in either camp of like, yes, only certain people can be labeled this way, or yes, everyone should get to do it.
Sounds like labels in general. There is
little
comfort in labels.
Oh, no! That's so true. I hate them.
Real quick, before we're coming up on the end of our time, so fast. My brain keeps going back to close to the beginning of the conversation, Phil and Jackson talking about these terms we use, whether it be minister or theologian or prophet or whatever, as a way of being and a way of doing, and also the thing that sort of names what we want to do with our art, why we create our art.
Mm-hmm.
And the one term we haven't used yet, which is the one that tends to resonate the most with me, is pastor. And knowing that, like, hearing both Jackson and Phil talk about and name these particular terms, knowing them personally and knowing their calling, these terms make so much sense for them, and the way that they use their art in the world. And thinking about myself and my calling, I tend to want to use my art for caring for people. Not that the other terms don't encompass that too, but it's the
job description versus the label of, or
Yes.
minister is like the label of what the job description is, which is pastoring. Like you do the pastoring.
right. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Less of a credential and more of what Phil was talking about earlier, which is what does this mean about what we do and how it functions in the world.
Well, in that embodiment, I think a minister probably carries it, but definitely artist and theologian can be very hands off. I'm questioning that with artist, but yeah, that you can be removed from the people as opposed to like putting food in mouths and clothes on bodies. And that's a really important. This is why we have a manifesto and not a clear, concise identity statement. Yeah.
Jackson's timer is.
Is a label that Maddie resists. We are coming down to the end of our time, and I think what we've discovered is there's lots of kind of
Resonances and dissonances
and like complications with these words, and also that they all are pulling us in a general direction towards other words to continue to add to the Venn diagram of these words.
We love words.
Word cloud.
A word cloud. We're getting closer.
Getting closer to a word cloud.
I really like word clouds.
Might have to make one for the ad material for this particular podcast episode. If there are, we would love to extend this kind of conversation out to you all. These are surely words that you have run up against in your lives. And we'd love to hear your resonances and dissonances with them as well. You can find us on many, many sites. Some of you can find us in person. Don't try to do that.
What does that mean? Nobody come find Jackson. He doesn't want to see you. I think what he means is please don't stalk us? Is that what you're saying?
I'm probably going to edit all that out. We have the social medias, though. We have Instagram,
find us there.
Facebook, Twitter. We still have what was once known as Twitter. Does
anything get posted to it?
Sure.
Yeah, auto posts.
Yeah,
from
auto posts and
I
things
didn't
like
know
that.
that.
Yeah,
Instagram sometimes.
Don't find us on that.
Find us on many, many social media sites. We also have a Discord server.
Hang out.
Yeah. Come hang out on the Discord server. We also have Patreon. And on Patreon, we have communication and cool things over there. But we also have a special after show, which we are about to jump into.
So we have so many other words
here.
to say.
Many, many more words. So if you're looking for a way to be a part of the community of Liturgical Shenanigans in another way, Patreon's a great way to do that. And you can have access to a bunch of fun stuff, including early access to this podcast and the access to the after show.
Which will probably be all of us sharing in detail our own systematic theology.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. Doctrine by doctrine by
Okay.
doctrine.
Woof.
Bye.
Hope to see you there. Bye.